Again, here we are. We're in Module 9. Now, Module 9 is dealing with the organizational units themselves. So, we talk about users, creating users, and creating the different accounts in the previous module. And now here we are. We're looking at the OU structure itself. So, those users and groups that we had before, we've got to kind of look at how are we grouping these things together. And that's all an OU is a logical grouping that we can assign permissions and rights to. And essentially, got a couple of great walkthrough videos associated with this module's homework. And that's actually the two videos that follow this one. And I've got links to them as well in the homework. But in one, the presenter breaks down an organization or a business into OU structure and walks through the ins and outs of setting up an OU. And in the following video after that, adding in users, groups, etc. And all along the way discussing the need to limit access in certain areas and grant access in others. So we need to look at the OU as a way to manage resources, a logical grouping of resources that also allows us to control access to associated resources. Okay. So, in a way, we can think about it like breaking things down into folders and subfolders, and then assigning different policies to each of the folders. They're not folders. They are organizational units and groups and users. Okay. Or they could be the devices themselves. We've got our console where we can go through and do our work relative to the containers that are built for us by the system and the OUs that we create. Okay. So we can tell the difference between the OUs and the containers by the icon that's there. We'll call them containers, not folders. Folders you put documents in, containers you put objects in. Now, containers, we use the word container in this context, but we'll also use the word container in association with Docker and containers. And that's a web server instance. We'll talk about that in another lecture. So with that said, we can go through and compare the advantages and the disadvantages to whether we're using a group or an OU. Okay. So a user can be a member of many groups, but a user can only be a member of one OU. For some, that's a tough concept to wrap your head around and to, I guess, set into place. Right. So when we're breaking things down, when we break down the organization as a whole, if I put users into an OU, their user account exists in that OU and in that OU only. Now, that doesn't mean they can't access resources elsewhere. There's ways to go about that, but it can be cumbersome. Right? So we've got to think about those things when we're laying out the design as a whole. And as I said, the next video is a great walkthrough on that and setting up the organizational structure. And it's just for a little tire shop. It could be a far larger organization. We'll start small. Okay, so we can look at it from the perspective of, I'm going to create a unit OU based on functionality. I can create an OU based on location. And it's all just ways of, as I said, they're logical groupings of resources. And from one system to the next, we may have similar companies, but they have different ways of breaking the system up or breaking the company up into organizational units. So this is a good example of breaking up an OUs based on the functions. So there's the accounts going into marketing function, server administrators function, database function, web function. It's what they do. So everything's being broken down that way. So there's different ways, and like I said, we could go geographical. It all depends on what's best for the different system as a whole. We could do it departmental. This is not functional. This is departmental. It can get cumbersome. Like I said, the user goes into the OU. So these users could only be members of the sales department OU. These can only be members of the IT department OU. It's not a bad thing. It's just knowing how it all plays in together. It's like building a database in a way. You plan everything out. You map it all out, all the linkages, before you start doing the work. So that's all this is, mapping everything out. Got a number of advantages and disadvantages of each of the models. And we'll walk through those. You can come up with a hybrid model where, all right, I've got location, the geographic, and within it, we have function. That's possible. So we have organizational units with organizational units within them. Advantages and disadvantages to that. Now, conceptually, a lot of this is rehash, but now we're in the application phase of it. We're actually going through and setting it up. So in this module, you're going to go through each of the 2 videos that I've got provided for you. Follow along with what he does for his tire store system, his tire store domain. And within the domain that we have created in CyberHub, do the same thing as if it was his domain. The name doesn't matter. So within our domain, you'll go create all of those TireHub related OUs. And then in the second video, you'll walk through and create groups and user accounts. You'll be interacting and creating those objects in Server 1 and CyberHub. Okay? It's a great exercise. And just grab screenshots. You can grab screenshots along the way. Or once they've been created, expand them out. At a minimum, it would be 2 screenshots. One, when you get done with the OUs, go into the console, expand those objects out, and grab a screenshot of that. You can grab screenshots along the way where you're setting whatever permissions, whatever you, at a minimum, you're going to have at least 2 screenshots, one for the OU and one for the OUs, and the other for the users and groups. See you in Module 10.